From the Democratic Party's left, Senator Eugene McCarthy declares war on the war.
And the entire history of this war in Vietnam, no matter what we call it, has been one of continued error and of misjudgment.
Senator Robert Kennedy is not yet a candidate, but he sounds like one.
The history of conflict among nations does not record another such lengthy and consistent chronicle of error as we have shown in Vietnam.
Candidate George Wallace is also unhappy.
And I would ask my Attorney General to proceed for indictments against every person in this country who advocates victory of the communists.
Is the Republican frontrunner a new Richard Nixon?
If people looking at me say that's a new Nixon, then all that I can say is, well, maybe you didn't know the old Nixon.
Michigan's Governor George Romney is also running, but he will withdraw before the first primary battle in New Hampshire in mid-March. In February, television took us to another snowy battlefield in Grenoble, France.
The 10th Winter Olympic Games, brought to you in color by satellite.
Cameras do not evaluate, they transmit, whether it's war pictures or the grace and beauty of the Olympics. Grenoble was the first Olympics broadcast in color, and with the then startling number of 36 cameras. Jim McKay covered the Olympics for ABC Sports.
We call them mini cams, but they had great long black cables with them instead of the slender cable that we have today. They were not remotely controlled, and they were huge. I don't know what they weighed, but they would break the back of even the strongest cameraman.
This country's best hope for a gold medal at Grenoble did not attend the opening ceremonies. 19-year-old Peggy Fleming.
The next morning at 6 a.m., we started competing. So my coach and parents didn't think that that was too wise to risk getting sick at this point and get overtired or whatever. And I watched it on TV.
The pressure more and more was on Peggy, although the skating is actually in the comparatively early part of the games. And there she was at Grenoble in her pale green dress, as I recall, skating what she said later I think was not her best performance.
I just wanted to get through it. I was 89 points ahead of the second girl, just going into the free skating phase. So all I had to do was stand up. I mean, I didn't have to give the best performance in free skating of my life. All I had to do was live through those 4 minutes. And I always thought, well, something's going to go wrong. I'm going to, you know, pass out in the middle of this number. And when I got through it and I was still standing up, I thought, gosh, I guess I did it. It was wonderful. And just, you know, have the Star-Spangled Banner played in your honor. And I was real proud of myself and proud of the country that I was from.
The hero of the Olympics was Jean-Claude Killy of France, winner of 3 gold medals in skiing. But in the slalom, he had finished behind 2 skiers who were later disqualified, and one, Austria's Karl Schranz, protested.
He said, wait a minute. He said, on my second run where I missed that gate, the reason I missed the gate was because a guard or a policeman or somebody skied out in front of me on the course, and I would have hit him if I didn't ski off the course and miss the gate. The officials, we know we didn't see that.
Television came to the rescue with a not-so-instant replay.
Finally, the decision was made to come into our television truck. All the officials came in there for a couple of hours, as I recall, looked at the tape over and over again. So they watched and watched and watched, and finally they came out and said, sorry, nobody came out in front of you. Jean-Claude Killy wins the 3rd gold medal.
A wild race and a long day, but once again, Killy has done it.
As far as I know, and I'm pretty sure of it, that was the first time that television was ever used to decide the result of a sports event.
The Olympic wars on the electronic battlefield produced some medals and no casualties. But in Washington, it is the Vietnam War that continues to preoccupy most of the Johnson administration. Not everybody in the White House is so preoccupied. In February, Lady Bird Johnson holds a Discover America fashion show. For 68, these clothes were tame. Everywhere else, anything goes and everything went.
Color sky, Havana Lake. Color sky, rose carmethine. Alizari and crimson. Where your love like heaven. Where your love like heaven. Where your love like heaven.
Do people really dress like that? No. Then what are designers doing? One of them, John Weitz, explains.
Whatever it is that you read in retrospect of 18 years ago is the reflection of a lot of fashion shows we used to do. And fashion shows are usually enormous nonsense. They're very entertaining, and that's all.
Color in sky, Russian blue.
Alternatives to the suit and tie, the Nehru jacket, medallions, turtlenecks, and White's design for a ranchero scarf to be worn instead of a tie.
I tried to forget the flops, and I honestly don't remember. I'm sure that ranchero scarves were a flop.
Hey, Joe, where you going with that gun of yours?
February 24th. In Vietnam, the Marines retake the ancient city of Hue after a month of bloody, house-to-house fighting. The once beautiful city is destroyed in the process. The price in human lives is terrible. Later, we learned just how terrible. When the communists first took over, they executed 3,000 civilians. We didn't see that on television. What we saw and heard was that in 1 week, 542 Americans were killed in Vietnam. There were just too many bodies to ignore. Newspapers began to change their minds editorially. Doubts about Vietnam began to spread. The next to doubt was CBS anchorman Walter Cronkite.
I went to Dick Salant, who was our president of CBS News, and said, you know, I think that maybe it's time for one of us, and I'd like to be the one who does it, goes out there and says just what it looks like to a reasonably astute, informed observer.
Cronkite and his crew travel around Vietnam. He interviews officials, officers, and soldiers. And then on February 27th, in a primetime news special, Walter Cronkite said what had to be said.
I was going to have to say that I didn't think we were winning in Vietnam, that the Viet Cong offensive, the North Vietnamese offensive, indicated we were not in the position that we thought we were before the Tet Offensive. So I put together my piece, and at the end of the factual report, I said, I'm going to take off that hat now, factual reporter. I'm going to deliver a rare thing in these columns, a commentary.
When Cronkite came back and pointed out the flaws that he saw, it had an impression on Johnson, most certainly did. Well, I remember him telling me words to the effect, if we've lost Walter Cronkite, we're going to lose a whole lot of people.
One thing Lyndon Johnson was always good at was counting, or so he believed. That is Eugene McCarthy. He's the politician who said being in politics is like being in football. You have to be smart enough to understand the game and dumb enough to think it's important. What he meant was that he could count too. Come back to 1968, to the electronic battlefield of New Hampshire. Or is that a football field? Either way, bring your mittens. It gets real windy up there, even outdoors.
Come back to our world and winds of change in the winter of '68.
The good news is now you can save on the perfect combo, Weight Watchers Pizza and Diet Coke. So how can there be any bad news? No more yearning, desire burning. No, what's the use? Now there's chocolate mousse. Yes, Weight Watchers deeply chocolate, velvety chocolate mousse. Weight Watchers, this is living.
Nissan's introduced more new cars in a year than anyone in history, plus a whole new attitude.
We got the power to make you move. We make you feel like driving. We make you feel
wide-open Pulsar NX, the longest wide-body van, and the Pathfinder 4x4 of the year.
You know, life's too short to worry about impressing other people. I mean, have you ever been really impressed by a person's credit card? What matters about a credit card is how it impresses me. MasterCard gives me what I want, and anything is possible. It goes where I want to go. Could be Timbuktu. When I want, day or night. Don't talk to me about impressions. Give me possibilities. MasterCard. Master the possibilities.
Nance, I'm gonna run the dishwasher.
Not full.
Nancy Wade believes never run a dishwasher till it's full.
Another bowl. 3 more plates.
Not full.
The perfect way to prove lemon scent sunlight out-cleans a leading brand on tough, starchy food.
4 bowls and a platter.
Now it's full.
After sitting all day, they really need lemon sunlight in tests against the leading brand on tough, starchy food, Sunlight Clean Better.
Nice.
Now you can empty it.
Try lemon sunlight. It really stands up to dishes that sit.
Our World will be right back.
My green tambourine.
You never even thought about it? How it feels to be free?
On the Disney Sunday movie.
What are you doing? He steals slaves.
Come on, brother!
Two friends' courageous race to freedom. History would call them the Liberators. Sunday.
Are you having a problem with auto insurance? If you are having a problem getting or paying for insurance, see the Insurance Mart. Have you been canceled? Is the price just too high? Have you had speeding tickets, accidents, or a DUI? Then call the Insurance Mart for low prices, low down payments, and easy monthly terms. In Jackson, telephone 668-7600 or Tennessee toll-free 800-854-5656. The Insurance Mart. We solve problems.
The TV7 Sunday Night Showcase. Sunday nights at 10:30 here on TV7.
Terry Wade is reportedly alive and well. Details at 10.
Welcome back to 1968. Our story takes place between the end of January and the end of March. It's about war and television. The Vietnam War is being fought on television, also the war to end the war, several political wars, and one ski slope war. No wonder a kind of performance reality has evolved, one where image counts at least as much as truth. Of course, a notion like that can get you in trouble because, as Lyndon Johnson once pointed out, while you're saving your face, you're losing your ass. He did not speak from ignorance.
One place where performance reality evolved and where image counted more than truth was the psychedelic saloon, for want of a better phrase. Places like Fillmore East, which opened that winter in New York City, were concert stages where kids could come and drink a 7-Up, maybe sneak a joint or a tab of LSD, and watch the Doors or the Grateful Dead or an artist like Janis Joplin singing as if her heart would break or her larynx. It was a distortion of sound, of mind, and many of our kids embraced it because they had looked at the real world and didn't like what they saw. And some very straight establishment adults looked at the war in Vietnam that winter when the winds of change were blowing and changed their minds. One was the brand new Secretary of Defense.
I, Clark M. Clifford, do solemnly swear. Do solemnly swear.
Clark Clifford has been a trusted advisor to presidents, Democratic presidents, for 20 years, and he's known to be a strong supporter of Johnson's Vietnam policy.
I reflected what the public reflected, and that was that we were prevailing and that almost any time the war would be over.
But in his first few weeks in office, Clifford's view of the war and Johnson's policies takes a dramatic turn.
I can't tell you how many hours in what is known as the tank with the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I couldn't find out what our plan was for victory in Vietnam. The reason I couldn't find out was we didn't have any. And it was at that time that I changed my entire opinion of the war in Vietnam.
What a field day for the heat. 1,000 people in the street singing songs and they carry inside.
Then there are those who don't think we ought to be fighting this war in the first place, and have been saying so for some time now. Not all of them are males of an age to be drafted. Not all of them are young. In '68, the young are divided too, and not just by the war. Here is one side. Here's the other side. Psychedelic, and even if you didn't drop acid, LSD, the music could often make you feel as if you did. Jimi Hendrix. Janis Joplin. Jim Morrison and the Doors. Jefferson Airplane. Paul Kantner played guitar for the Airplane.
I don't want to glorify drugs, but in '68, early '68 anyway, drugs were still relatively cool in the society. In those days, drugs were almost not the main thing. They were just an attendant sacrament almost to the wonder that you were experiencing.
But by March, the counterculture is a consumer item, and its chief capitalist is poster artist Peter Max. His work shows up on posters, but also on motor scooters, even a line of clocks by General Electric.
But this way I'm able to give art to the people, to my friends on this planet.
There was no strategy on my end to capitalize, and so maybe I was the most withered person at the time visually, and so all the corporations wanted to take my works and apply them on their stuff.
We'll ride on the rain, we'll sail on your touch, I'll talk to your eyes, I love so much.
Rod McEwen, call him the capitalist of romance. This gravelly-voiced singer and poet releases an incredible 4 albums between February and March. Good vibes are big business.
Well, it's odd because all of a sudden your name's in public domain. I mean, on the one hand, it's a big treat to wake up in the morning without knowing anything about it in advance and find yourself in Peanuts or Pogo.
And his book, Listen to the Warm, is a bestseller. How does it sound today?
Is love collective? Not anymore, it's not. We're lucky if it lives above the jukebox bleat. And so when I think of love and loving, I think of people dying alone for lack of love. These are the days of the dancing, 6 feet apart. Discotheque has tapped that time of loving into time. Mr. Roebuck still likes Mr. Sears. Abercrombie's stuck with Fitch all these years. There must be others out there somewhere. But where?
Certainly not at Quezon. Since the Tet Offensive began in January, some 6,000 Marines have been pinned down at this outpost. They are steadily bombarded by rockets and mortar fire. They are surrounded by 20,000 North Vietnamese regular troops, under siege and waiting. Jeff Gralnick is covering Quezon for CBS News.
Once siege mentality had settled in, the Marines there were, in effect, live bait. What the military wanted, what the military felt it needed, was a set-piece battle.
In Washington, Lyndon Johnson is obsessed with holding Khe Sanh. He has a scale model of the base in the White House, and he has pledged that Khe Sanh will never be another Dien Bien Phu, the decisive defeat that drove the French out of Vietnam in 1954 and whose anniversary is approaching. Meanwhile, the Marines at Khe Sanh wait.
You couldn't approach Khe Sanh except by air. C-123s were being shot down, C-130s were being blown up on the runway, helicopters were being shot down, C-130s had come in at 500 feet, dropped stuff all over what was left of the runway, and then hightail it up and out of the way.
When the weather is clear, the fury of American air power is called to the hills surrounding the base. Newsweek says it best, the agony of Khe Sanh.
It was like living in a latrine. There's an inescapable aroma at Khe Sanh that nobody could put their finger on. It just smelled like Khe Sanh. It was awful duty.
On March 10th, the New York Times publishes a leaked report that General Westmoreland has asked for 206,000 more troops, a 40% increase in our commitment. And for a war we've been told we're winning. 2 days later, in the icy waters of the New Hampshire primary, the president's political strength will be tested for the first time since the Tet Offensive. The inquisitor, Senator Eugene McCarthy, has been campaigning vigorously all over the state against the war.
Senator Eugene McCarthy in New Hampshire. Our country, right or wrong. When right, to be kept right. When wrong, to be put right. Vote McCarthy, March 12th.
I think almost anybody running against Johnson on any platform, in a one-on-one in the Democratic Party, could have gotten more than 12%, maybe 20%. And with the addition of the war issue, why you could figure maybe 10% more.
The president's name is not on the ballot, but his campaign machine is urging a write-in vote. McCarthy's campaign has caught the hearts and minds and energy of the young. College students invade New Hampshire by the busload, even getting a shave and a haircut to be clean for Gene. McCarthy does better than even he expected, 42% of the vote to Johnson's 49%.
We were able to claim an absolute victory in terms of delegates and a relative victory in terms of what it had been said we'd get in the way of a popular vote.
This may have been almost as big a shock to Johnson as the Tet Offensive, because this was his world. This is the supreme politician. This is the man who has risen from the hill country of Texas from nothing on his savvy about votes, elections, and people.
Robert Kennedy is still not a candidate, and he will not become a candidate if President Johnson will accept a deal. Kennedy's press secretary was Frank Mankiewicz.
He had made a proposal. He had used Ted Sorensen to go to Clark Clifford, who was then the Secretary of Defense, and in a sense put that proposition forward, that a commission of wise men might perhaps study the situation, would come up with recommendations, the president would abide by them, and if the president would agree to do that, then Senator Kennedy would not run.
So I went immediately to President Johnson, repeated in detail what Ted Sorensen had said to me, and President Johnson summarily said, not acceptable. Just go tell Sorensen right away, I want no part of it. Let him do anything he chooses to do.
I am announcing today my candidacy for the presidency of the United States. I do not run for the presidency merely to oppose any man, but to propose new policies.
President Johnson does decide to consult with wise men about the war, wise men of his own choosing.
President Johnson had a number of outside advisors, people who had served in previous administrations, who had been troubleshooters, who had been military people.
People like former Secretary of State Dean Acheson, former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Maxwell Taylor. Nearly 5 months earlier at the White House, the wise men, nearly all hawks, had supported the president's Vietnam policy. Now, the birds were not all of a feather.
And I briefed on the political diplomatic situation.
I remember a few things about the briefing. For example, I remember at one stage very clearly Clark Clifford saying to me, did I think that that a military solution was feasible? And my answer was that in the circumstances and under the restrictions that were imposed, that I didn't think that that was foreseeable in any foreseeable period of time. And I recommended very flatly and directly that we go for a bombing halt and a negotiation.
He invited them back, spent afternoon and part of a morning with them, and was shocked to find out that almost everyone had changed his mind.
Come back to the last weekend in March of 1968, when Lyndon Johnson takes a good look at his cards and folds his hand.
Our world continues. Winds of change in the winter of '68. Headache, pressure, and congestion all together. Major symptoms of sinus complex. You need to feel better, but not drowsy. You need Sinutab 2 no drowsiness formula, so you feel altogether better.
You've just had your dentures professionally cleaned.
How can I keep them looking this way?
With professional strength Efferdent. Efferdent removes stains, kills germs, cleans away plaque, even in between. For a professional looking clean, get Efferdent.
This is the beginning. The all-new Chrysler LeBaron. Beauty with a passion for driving. Advanced front-wheel drive traction. Positive response suspension. Fuel-injected high-torque power. Choose precision 5-speed. Heart-pounding turbo. All with the Chrysler Protection Plan. The new LeBaron from Chrysler. Driving to be the best.
Annoyed hates hot quality pizza. He loves to make your hot pizza ice cold. Call Domino's Pizza and avoid the noise. We keep the cold out and all this quality in. So when you want quality pizza hot and delicious, Domino's Pizza delivers. One call does it all.
Sunday, Kathleen Turner, Michael Douglas, and Danny DeVito, Romancing the Stone.
Welcome back to March 1968. A presidency shaped by and haunted by television is about to reach a fitting climax. Fitting because it will take place on television. It is the last weekend in March. President Lyndon Johnson has said he will speak to the nation on Sunday night. He plans to announce he is willing, once again, to stop bombing North Vietnam as an incentive to peace. It is not all he will announce. Later, Johnson would say that doing what's right isn't the problem. It's knowing what's right.
Sitting here resting my bones, and this loneliness won't leave me alone.
In late March of '68, Lyndon Johnson was looking for assurance and finding doubt. His approval rating in the Gallup poll had fallen to its lowest ebb. The war had put many of his plans for the Great Society on hold. And trusted old allies like Martin Luther King told him he was wrong.
I have become deeply disenchanted with President Johnson. I feel that he is so emotionally involved in the war in Vietnam and so concerned about saving face more than achieving peace.
With Bobby Kennedy now in the presidential race, Johnson knew he was up against not just a candidate, but Camelot.
What he was looking at, of course, was that Senator Kennedy was going to beat him for the nomination, and that he would wind up then in history as a sort of a between two bookends, each one of which a Kennedy.
Lyndon Johnson was exhausted. Secretary of State Dean Rusk.
Except for the men and women who carried the battle out there and their families, no one in this country agonized over Vietnam more than did Lyndon Johnson. We could never stop him from getting up at 4:30 or 5 in the morning to go down to the operations room to check on the casualties from Vietnam. Every one of those took a little piece out of him.
On the day before his Vietnam speech, Johnson worked with the man who wrote it, Harry McPherson.
He said, oh, you can, that's all right. You don't have to worry about the length. I think I want to have an ending of my own. And he walked on out of the room, and I turned around to Clifford and said, is he going to say sayonara? said goodbye. Clifford looked at me as if I were an idiot.
On television's Hollywood Palace, the night before the president made his speech, Jimmy Durante sang prophetically about old man time.
Old man time, he's so mean, meanest man you ever seen. He gives you youth and he steals it away.
Sunday, March 31st, Washington, D.C.
And they took very heavy to make it be a day there.
With a crude videotape recorder, Lyndon Johnson rehearses what will be his most famous speech.
His secretary and I sat there with him and made little changes in what he was doing. I don't know any other speech that he ever rehearsed to this extent. Sometimes he went over them, but this one had to be perfect.
Johnson called me and said, what do you think about the speech? A peculiar question since I'd been doing nothing else for 2 months. So I think it's okay. I'm glad it's coming out the way it did. And he said, I've got my own ending I'm putting on. I said, so I've heard. He said, do you know what's in it? I said, I'm afraid I do. And I'm really sorry. And he said, well, okay, thanks, partner.
And I can remember that Sunday evening sitting down from the television set and cross-legged on my rug, and I watched and the speech went on just as I expected it.
Now the President of the United States.
Good evening, my fellow Americans. Tonight I want to speak to you of peace in Vietnam and Southeast Asia. Tonight, I renew the offer I made last August to stop the bombardment of North Vietnam.
When the speech ended, or should have ended, he said, and then I have something else to add, and instantly, without any other word, I knew precisely what was coming, that he was going to do it.
I shall not seek, and I will not accept the nomination of my party for another term as your president.
The Johnson presidency. In a way, it has become another casualty of Vietnam. Later, in his memoirs, Johnson writes about that night, and tonight, actor Dennis Weaver reads some of what Johnson had to say.
In 45 minutes, I had finished. It was all over, and I felt better. The weight of the day and the weeks and the months had lifted. I had done what I knew ought to be done. Now it was history, and I could do no more. Just before I drifted off to sleep that night, I prayed that Hanoi had listened and would respond. The chance for peace, the opportunity to stop death and destruction, the opening toward a new decade of hope. All these were enfolded in the words I had spoken. There was nothing more I could do that day. All that I could do, I had done.
Come back to our world after the winter of 1968, to some things we saw on television and some things we did not.
Our world continues in a moment.
Stop squirming. Sucrets spray will take care of your sore throat. Trust me.
For relief of sore throat pain, Sucrets lasts twice as long as the other leading brand.
Maximum strength Sucrets spray lasts twice as long.
Calgon, take me away!
Indulge yourself in Calgon luxury. Let Calgon soften and pamper you. It's like no other bath experience.
It's paradise.
Calgon, lose yourself in luxury.
Colombian coffee, hand-picked by Juan Valdez, the richest coffee in the world.
Sibling rivalry. If you worry about your kids fighting, John Stossel shows why it actually could be good for them. Watch 2020.
Tonight. Welcome back to the legacy of the television battles of those few weeks in 1968. On the last day of March, the television battles of Lyndon Johnson ended. But when Johnson stepped out of the picture tube remained filled with images of war and violence at home, which is to say, the mirror remained accurate, and the winds continued to blow.
This is the end, my only friend, the end.
On April 4th, Martin Luther King Jr. was shot to death outside a motel in Memphis, Tennessee. He was 39.
So, my thanks to all of you, and now it's on to Chicago, and let's win there.
Moments after Robert Kennedy claimed victory in the California primary, he was shot to death in the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles. The convention he never got to in Chicago was the most outrageous in American history. For 5 days, police and National Guardsmen clubbed, gassed, and arrested anti-war demonstrators and bystanders as well. 3 superstars of the counterculture became victims of their own excesses. Jim Morrison of the Doors died of a heart attack at 27. Jimi Hendrix died from an overdose of barbiturates in 1970. 16 days later, Janis Joplin died from booze, drugs, and perhaps her own rage. The war in Vietnam continued until 1975. 7 years and 1 month from President Johnson's speech, Saigon fell to the communists. We watched it on TV.
Governments also learned from the television war. They learned they didn't want to fight their wars on television unless they controlled the television. And that is why these pictures of the American invasion of Grenada in 1983 were taken by the United States government. Neither journalists nor their cameras were allowed to come along for the ride. The politicians explained we might get hurt. Also, we might blow the surprise. And in 1982, when Great Britain went to war over the Falkland Islands, it controlled TV coverage. This is Calgary. At the Winter Olympics of 1988, it will be a busier place than it is now. And instead of 36 cameras, there will be close to 100 cameras.
Well, there it is the way it was in February and March of 1968. It was not just the reality of the Vietnam War that soured Lyndon Johnson's presidency. Americans had been dying in Vietnam when Eisenhower was president and would still be dying there under Gerald Ford. What changed that winter was our perception of the war. There was a new awareness that we would have to give more to the war to win it or settle for less than victory. And television did that. Never mind that the Tet Offensive failed. Television showed us the enemy at the gates of Saigon. It showed us a president crumbling a little more every day, right there in our living room. Television did not tell us whether to stay in the game or get out. It did show us what the stakes were.
And on the subject of the power of television, let's get one thing straight. The power of television is roughly that of a hula hoop. The power is in the pictures. And the most powerful pictures aren't always on television. For example, remember the day General Luan shot the prisoner in broad daylight and in front of cameras? Television showed us the moving pictures of what happened. We saw the general shoot, we saw the man fall. But the really moving picture was the one where nothing moved. This one. In Eddie Adams' picture, as in the life of the man who was shot, time is stopped. Nothing happens next. Forever. Except in your own mind. And that, too, is the power of a picture. And so it goes.
These things also happened in the winter of 1968.
For heroism at Da Nang, Lieutenant Jane Lombardi, an Air Force nurse, became the first woman to receive combat decorations in Vietnam.
Cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin, the first man in space, was killed while testing a new plane.
At the ordination of an Episcopal priest in Berkeley, California, the hymns were played by a rock group, Mother's Laundry. The sermon was titled, God is Doing His Thing.
A new movie by Mel Brooks, the producers, featured a song and dance number called Springtime for Hitler.
In the first heavyweight title fight, in the new Madison Square Garden, Joe Frazier knocked out Buster Mathis in the 11th round.
In Memphis on WBBJ-TV, Jackson.
Our World and Jack and Mike will not be seen tonight, so the WBBJ-TV 7 in Jackson could bring you the following movie.
This is an historically documented 24 hours that became one of the most famous chapters in the annals of the Old West.